So let's begin the second half of our practice day. And maybe we can close that? Yeah. Yeah, the door. Yeah, there's a little bit noise downstairs. We'll that. Thank you. Thanks, George. Give us a little more quiet. And thanks, Venerable, for turning off the water before during meditation. I pray that someone will. I don't notice it until we begin, and then I always pray someone. But usually no one does. But thank you very much. Okay, so second half of the practice day. Just a couple of things. First of all, about the emptiness of phenomena. Remember we were talking about this morning, Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned that in order of development of grasping into true existence and so forth, first you grasp if you talk about the person, first you grasp to the aggregates, which are the basis of designation, and then you grasp to the person, because there's no way to identify the person until you've identified the aggregates. But in terms of realizing emptiness, it's said that you realize the emptiness of persons first, because there's something special, there's something, the person being imputed upon a combination of body and mind, maybe appears, and as because it's something intimate and part of our own continuum, it's more easy to understand as empty than phenomena. But we have to understand the emptiness of phenomena also. If you've actually identified the subtle object of negation, of personal selflessness, not just a self-supporting, substantially existent I, but the I, the mode of appearing to the innate grasping. Do you know what I mean by innate grasping? Do you know, Venerable? As opposed to intellectually formed grasping. The way that it would appear to us as a child, or without any kind of education and tenets, the way it appears to animals, and that has appeared to us in numberless lives, a sense of the self. If we've identified that subtle way that the I is appearing as though truly existent, inherently existent, existing from its own side and so forth, then we can apply that same kind of understanding of emptiness to other things. We can use the same reasoning that we've applied to the personal selflessness to other things. Like, say, for instance, the form aggregate, because this is one of the bases of designation of the person, or basis of imputation of the person, right? The form aggregate. So if you are sitting and you observe, you might have the idea, first of all, well, the self doesn't exist. Yeah, I can see that. It's just a figment. It merely exists as an imputation, and this sense of a truly existent self is an illusion. But certainly the body, that's tangible. That's different than the person. So there might be that kind of doubt at first, but you can apply the same logic to the body. The way that the body appears to your mental consciousness, not just with your eyes open, but let's say the sense of the solidity and presence of your body as one thing, the body, my body. Or if you're thinking a part of the body, like my arm hurts, the arm would be the particular aspect of the form aggregate. That has parts, just like the person has parts that upon which it's imputed, right? The person is imputed upon collection of aggregates. Arm, or let's say body, let's say just start with body. Body is imputed, is also, from the conventional point of view, upon a basis of parts. The toe, from everything, the toes, the foot, the ankle, what's this part called? The thigh? Thanks. Yeah. Isn't this called, one of them is thigh and one's calf? Thigh and leg. Okay. I thought one of them was a calf. Maybe that's something else. Okay, calf. He's calling it the leg. Knee, thighs, hips, belly, back. Oh, I mean, you can enumerate different kinds of parts of the body, and then the internal organs. Body is merely a concept. My body, if you think of my body, is merely a concept imputed upon that collection of parts. So that, like the person is imputed on the collection of five aggregates, conventionally speaking, the body and all phenomena, as they exist conventionally, are mere conceptual designations, are merely names imputed upon a collection of parts. They have no findability. Body doesn't exist here as a concept from its own side. Pardon? If it existed over there, say, okay, we have to do the same thing. We have to first observe in our mind how the body seems to be appearing to our mind as inherently existent. Not just the merely imputed body, because that's not what appears, although that appears to our mind, that's not the main thing our mind grasps to when we think our body. Oh, my body might get hurt. I'm not going to do that. Or my body is tired. My body aches. There's a sense of the whole body in some cases, if you think your whole body is aching, or if in Venerable Ingrid's case, which vertebrae is it? You know which number it is? Fifth. She might be thinking that part of her body, my body hurts, she might be just centering there. But sometimes when we think of our body and say just the presence of your body, there's a sense of some kind of, I don't know, for lack of other words, looming, irrefutable presence of your body there. Yeah, same thing with outer phenomena. So it's a little more challenging than, first of all, than the self, which is a little more rainbow-like, a little more obviously or possibly understood more easily as an imputation. So the body, we have to first of all see how the body is being perceived. Compare it with how the body is understood to exist conventionally, according to Lord Buddha. The body is merely a name or concept designated to this collection of parts. There is no bodiness or body existing from the side of the aggregates, or, as Georgie is suggesting, somewhere different than the aggregates. How do we check that? Because if such a body existed, and you have to try to identify this in your own mind, not just the word body, but try to see how body appears to your mind as you're sitting here. The sense of the wholeness of your body, the looming, irrefutable presence of it. If that body existed in that way, really existing from its own side, the way it appears to your mind, it would have to be either inherently one with its collection of parts upon which it's imputed, in this case, all of the parts that we were just talking about, whether you call it leg or calf or whatever, all the different parts. It would have to be either inherently one with those parts or inherently different than those parts. So this kind of pervasion, I'm not saying perversion, this kind of pervasion is very important to get familiar with. If two things exist, it's really quite simple in a sense. If two things exist, they either have to be identical or different. So this cup and this cup, are they identical or different? Are they chik or tate? Chik means one or identical. Tate means different. Are they this cup and this cup? Are they chik or tate? They're different, right? They're tate. Well, what do you mean? This is a cup and this is a cup. They're the same, right? No, they're not identical. They may be, they're different examples, they're different illustrations of the generality of cup, but they're still, this cup is different than this cup. To perceive, if they were identical, if I perceived one, I would perceive the other, but this cup could be taken out, and it could be broken, and this cup could still exist. So that they are not one. You thinking about that?
I'm wondering.
I'll drink some out of this cup.
Especially from the materialist point of view, like the collection of parts of the body is the body. So this is body. All these parts together these parts of the body are the body.
Right.
The body.
Right. So this is one of the ways that we have to investigate further when we have other kinds of doubts arise. In the Majjhimakavatara by Chandrakirti, there's a famous analysis he did about the chariot, how we look for a chariot So you might think the chariot is identical, one with its parts, or different from its parts. Those are the two that we're dealing with. Actually, those are the only two possibilities you really have to do. But other doubts could come up. Oh no, it's the shape of the parts, or it's the mere collection of the parts. That it's different kinds of possibilities like that. There are 7 kinds of possible intellectual kind of doubts that might come up. The first 2 are the only 2 that really have to be attended to. The others are subsidiary, just to eliminate kind of nagging doubts that we might have, but you could actually eliminate them through one and other. So if the collection of parts itself is a multiplicity. So if the self were identical, the same way that if the self were identical with the aggregates are a multiplicity, right? Remember the kind of, consequences, absurd consequences that would come up. Either there would have to be many selves, as there are many parts that are differentiable, or there would have to be, as there is one self, there would have to be one aggregate. But even if you go out along that idea and think, oh yeah, there's just one aggregate, really the self is just the mind or something, even the mind has parts. So there would have to be many selves of those individual parts if the self were inherently existing from its own side, independent of other things. Did you just get that? Did you say you just got it?
Struggled with the multiplicity of selves if you thought they were the same as the aggregates. But I think maybe I got it.
Okay, think about it, yeah.
I think that it's because if the truly existent self was the same as the aggregates, the truly existent self would have to have parts, wouldn't it?
The truly existent self, either it could, well, the self itself, the appearance of this truly existent self is not something that has parts. If it were the same of the aggregates, because it doesn't have parts, either it would have to be, there would have to be many selves, one for each of the parts, or as the self is one, there would have to be just one part that it was imputed on, and so you'd have to choose one aggregate, but even that aggregate, whatever aggregate you choose, always has parts. When we talk about dependent origination, this is one of the meanings of when you talk about phenomena are dependent upon their parts. Every phenomena has parts in some way. Yeah, Derjay.
My father is a scientist, and that's like his religion, science, really.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of this materialist point of view of like,
I can't think of a good joke.
Separate mind and body. The mind is, what we call mind is just
is the body, yeah.
neurochemical reactions
Yes.
that are the body.
Mm-hmm.
So that for the scientists, or
Some scientists.
what I can tell from some scientists, there is one aggregate. I mean, there's just the body. I mean, they don't even talk about aggregates. The
Right.
body. There is no mind separate from the body. They aren't separable. And it's just the body, and that's what your body. That's who you are. That's
Right. So without analysis, a lot of things like that could be assumed. But if you start to check, they are conceptually different. When you talk about the mind, the actual experience of mind is different than the experience of body, of material. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about mind. So in the same way, the absurd consequences, if the self that appears to be truly existent, if that truly existent self existed, it would have to either be identical to the aggregates or different than the aggregates. The reason we choose the aggregates, you could say, if a truly existent self existed, it would have to be one with this cup or different than this cup, wouldn't it? In fact, it's not truly one with this cup, and it's not truly different than this cup. Same thing with anything, although you might say, well, that doesn't bring any particular realization, because that's not the basis of imputation of the person. But if you choose the basis of imputation, the aggregates, or if you choose a different basis, if you divide up the person into 6 elements, the solidity, the liquidity, the heat, and the motion, the air element of the body, and the space, which included the various empty spaces of the body, and the mind. They're sometimes called the 6 elements. You can impute the person on the 6 elements also. You don't have to impute only on the 5 aggregates. You can impute the person on the 12 ayatana, the 12 entrances, or the 18 dhatus. But generally, we would have talked about the 5 aggregates. So in the same way, the body, if you check for that sense of it, first you try to find the object of negation as you're in meditation. The body itself seems to be, when your mind is clear, seems to be something existing from its own side. Inherently existent, truly existent, irrefutable. If it existed in that way, it would either have to be identical, inherently one, with its parts, that is, its basis of designation, or inherently different than its parts. Actually, how does the body exist? Does the body exist at all?
George, many, many years ago, when I first started trying to study a little bit of Dharma, I remember Lama Thupten Yeshe said that only those sentient beings and human beings born from a womb could achieve enlightenment.
Oh, maybe what he meant was...
Then at that time, I didn't know why. I always say, well, how else you can be born? What is now happening with the cloning concerning with the possibility of achieving enlightenment for maybe in future some of these clones, human clones, do they have the possibility of achieving enlightenment?
I think what's referred to there, although it's not really relevant right here, I think what's referred to there is when we talk about the different kinds of birth, miraculous birth, birth from egg. So even though cloning, it still has the same kind of, maybe Buddha would say different, but it seems like someone who was cloned from an egg and a sperm could still achieve enlightenment. I think there it's just I think when it's talking about when the Buddha talked about different kinds of birth, he said birth from the womb, birth from egg, birth, miraculous birth, birth from heat. These 4 kinds of birth. So I don't think that would be contradictory. But let's leave that for the time being, because right now we're trying to investigate about this thing of emptiness. So you first try to identify the sense of the self, a sense of the body as being something inherently existent, not merely labeled. And I had asked before, does the conventional body exist? The body does exist conventionally, merely as a name upon its parts. And also its parts exist conventionally. Arm exists as a name or concept imputed upon its parts, one of which is the hand. And the hand exists as merely a concept imputed upon its parts. And let's say the knuckles exist merely as names imputed upon its parts. Where can you find the knuckle? At first you might say it's getting smaller, and you say, well, it's right there. But where? Is it in the bone? Is it in between the bone and the skin? Is it in the tendons? Again, if you go to the point of thinking it's the collection, you run into the absurd consequences that we did. If you're talking about a truly existent thing as being a collection of things, a multiplicity, because this sense of knuckle or hand or arm or body is something which has a sense of being one thing. My body. We don't say I have several bodies. I mean, unless you're talking about some New Age esoteric thing, my dream body or something like that. We say my body, right? It's like one thing. It's not like you have a couple extras in the closet. Do you? An extra? A clothing thing. Yeah. So maybe, yeah, but would that be your body? Say Carrie gets at his lab, he has another body, he has his body cloned. Would that be your body?
No, it would be body parts derived from the cells of my body.
It'd be interesting if it would be your body. Say, for instance, then if it were your body, then I would. You're not saying that, but say if it were your body, then I could say that when you died, we would still say, this is Carrie's body. Usually we say, we don't, although people might say that, Carrie no longer exists when Carrie has died, so you can't say it's Carrie's body. In the same way that a clone of Carrie, which would have a different mind stream, if it was a human being, or, I don't know, might be cloned to something else. I hope it's a human being. So, going bah in the corner or something. If it were, if it was another mind stream within that, it wouldn't be Carrie's body. It would be Frank's body, or, George's body, or Sam's body, or whoever's mind stream considered that to be their body. So there'd be a similar type of cells to your body, but it wouldn't be your body in that sense. So first identify the object of negation here, the sense of a body, bodiness. And then check if such a body existed, it would either have to be, if it existed inherently in that way, from its own side, not just as a concept or name, but really something existing from its own side. It would either have to be identical to its parts. In this case, the basis of designation. We can call parts or basis of designation. From the point of view of knowing that it's a designation upon parts, we call it the basis of designation, but we could also just call it the parts of the body, right? There might be some confusion otherwise. I'm referring to the same thing when I say the basis of designation, that is the collection of parts, or the parts themselves. So it would either have to be identical with that collection of parts, or inherently identical with it, or inherently different, like George is suggesting before. So if there was a body that was inherently different than the parts of the body, there would be some kind of metaphysical kind of soul of the body, or entity, metaphysical body that existed independent of the parts of the body, sort of like floating off. And if you cut this body up, that metaphysical entity, bodiness, would still exist, unharmed, completely independent of the body. And if it were one with the parts, as there are many parts, we would have to have the cognizance of having many bodies. But we don't use that terminology conventionally. We say, my body, one. Okay? So when you again you can use example like the self. You knew that you've already begun to get some understanding that the self is merely imputed and is not one with the parts and not different than the parts. It's illusion-like. But here you could also use the example, any of these examples, like an illusion, like a dream, like a reflection. What else? What's another good example? Like a mirage, like the reflection of a moon in a pool of water. Sometimes when you're out, maybe if you've had a bit to drink or imbibe, I won't mention any names, you might be a little bit disoriented, and you see in a very clear pool of water a moon, a reflection of the moon, and sometimes the animals can be confused. They might see the reflection in the pond, and maybe be obscured from maybe some branches are up there, so they don't see the moon itself. Is that possible optically? You could see the reflection in it, so they might think that's the moon. But it's actually completely empty of moon. There's never been moon in the lake, in the pool of water whatsoever, right? So like that, there's never been body. It appears like that, like a reflection. Like a dream that seems, in a dream, seems so real, but in retrospect, when you wake from that dream, you say, if it was a scary dream, you say, it was just a dream. Oh, thank goodness. Or if it was an enticing dream, oh, darn. It was just a dream. So you can use example of a dream or a reflection like that. So let's go through the same procedure now. As Avalokiteshvara said when asked by Shariputra, he said to Shariputra, Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage, that means someone who has awakened the Mahayana lineage, right? Someone who has great compassion. And someone who is a son or daughter of the lineage is someone who has actually developed bodhicitta, not just awakened the lineage. Son or daughter of the lineage means someone who is a bodhisattva. So they have bodhicitta. Anyone who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, because before they were bodhisattva, you wouldn't be calling it the perfection of wisdom, the wisdom gone beyond, right? They should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature, inherent existence. So not just the self that's imputed on the 5 aggregates, but each of the 5 aggregates, as an example, meditating on the basis of designation of the person as empty. Then you can begin to see, as the Buddha said in some of the sutras, it's possible, just like a magical creation can create other, from that emanation, it can emanate other emanations. So even though, the lower tenets would like to say if something's imputedly existent, like the self, it has to be imputed on something solid and real. But here the Prasangika say, no, it can be imputed on something which itself is just imputedly existent. In the same way that a magical illusion, magical emanation, can emanate other magical emanations. Follow what I'm saying? There's insubstantiality. There's no need that the basis of designation be real. So let's try this first of all. Sit comfortably. See if you can go directly through familiarity, to the clarity of your mental consciousness. Bring your attention within. Don't get confused by your eye consciousness. Sometimes open your eyes just slightly, let some light in. Everything that's appearing to your mental consciousness, the inner thoughts and its connection with the outer world, all of them are appearing within the clear light nature of your mind. Try to stabilize on that for a few moments to cause the conceptual thoughts to lose their power and their repetitive continuity. Again, notice the self. And if you could recall the logic in which we refuted that, we recognized it as empty. If the self existed in this way that it appears as inherently existent, truly existent, it would have to be truly one with the aggregates, or truly other. It can't be completely unrelated, inherently different than the aggregates. Then there would be no connection with the body, the mind. There'd be no sense of saying my body. It can't be inherently one with the aggregates, because then there would be the fault of the object imputed and the basis of designation, object of imputation and the basis of imputation being identical. There'd be the fault of there being many parts but one self. And so forth. So the self that we've been clinging to from beginningless time is actually void and empty. Doesn't exist at all, like reflection of a moon in a lake, a pool of water, is empty of moon. It appears so vividly, shimmering as the body is, the mind, as the person is shimmering in impermanence, but still empty, totally empty. Now try to apply this to the basis of designation of the person. Say to yourself, my body. Again, you can think of someone saying, oh, you've put on a few pounds there. Or, oh, you're looking very slim. In our culture, usually one is not as pleasant as the other to hear. Maybe in India it's the other way around. See if the body seems to appear to your mind when you say that. Or just say, my body. See if the sense of bodiness appears to your mental consciousness, not to your eyes, not to your tactile consciousness. As the tactile consciousness pervades the body, the sense of body can be induced by that also. That apprehension of feeling of the tactile consciousness, or solidity, not the mental factor of feeling, but the contact can be sensed by the tactile consciousness. It's its object of apprehension, right? Just as forms and colors, shape and color are perceived by eye consciousness, solidity, heat, cold, different kinds of textures are perceived by the body consciousness. In whatever way you perceive, this sense of body is something which is conventionally existent as a name imputed to the collection of parts. But try to see how it's appearing to your mind as something irrefutable, solid, looming there, existing from its own side, seemingly, obviously findable. Think of the body in another way. My body is the basis for imputing this I, which I've already begun to understand is empty, merely imputed upon the collection of parts, conventionally of one nature with the parts, but the truly existent, the appearance of a truly existent I, such a truly existent I couldn't be one with the parts, couldn't be different than them, couldn't be one with the body as it has parts. A body itself, one of the bases of designation of the self, seems to be, at first glance, more substantial than the self, the I, the ego. In these various ways, see if you can generate, with a very quiet mind, bringing your attention away from your eyes and your tactile sensation to your mental consciousness. See if you can develop a mental image of that sense of the body. Big body, small body. Attractive body, unattractive body. See if you can identify this mode of appearance of the body as one in which it seems to be existing from its own side, or truly. Not merely a name. From a Prasangika point of view, we can say something even substantial, because that's really is synonymous with true existence from the highest philosophical point of view. Looming, lumpish, set up from its own side. Once you get that sense of the body, the object of negation, again recognize the pervasion, develop some certainty, ascertain the pervasion. If such a body, as my mind grasps to, as inherently existing from its own side, if it were to exist, it would have to be inherently one with its parts, or inherently different than its parts. In the same way that you've analyzed the self, as you get familiar with that logic, you can apply it very rapidly to the body. If this inherently existent body were to exist as inherently different than its parts, would have no relationship to them whatsoever. There would be some metaphysical entity of body, even if I cut my arm or my leg or my finger. I wouldn't say I'd cut the body. If it were inherently one with the parts, it would therefore be findable there within the parts. As there are many parts, there would have to be many bodies. Or, looking from the other point of view, as we have as firm recognition there's one body, there would have to be just one part. Nothing's partless. Again, look at this appearance to your mind, the object of negation. My body that we believe in. My poor body, my sore body, my beautiful body, my ugly body, my sick body. The basis of all sorts of misconceptions. If it were to exist this way, the way that it appears, it would have to be findable as inherently different than its parts, or inherently one with its parts. If it existed. Since it is neither inherently different than its parts, it's absurd. It's not inherently one with its parts, it's also absurd. Therefore, this object of my conception, object of my innate grasping of an inherently existent, such an inherently existent body, does not exist at all. Like the moon in the lake. Like a lake moon. It appears, but it's totally empty. So using that example, you don't still grasp on to the appearance of the body and think of it as now empty, but just recognize that which was appearing before as having some reality is totally non-existent in that reality. The truly existent body does not exist. The body, the conventional body, is not truly existent because it is not inherently one with its parts, not inherently different than its parts. Like the reflection of the moon in a pool of water. If you can get a glimpse of that spaciousness, the mere negation of this truly existent body, like a vast space, a non-affirming negation, nothing implied, not body, conventional body appearing, just the negation of the body, certainty that it does not exist as inherent, as true. As the stability decreases of that apprehension due to mind wandering, you might have to analyze again. Or if the certainty, the surety of that meaning becomes obscure to your mind, again, go back and analyze. And this is the meaning of meditation, familiarizing again and again. The body appears to be one entity, a truly existent thing. If it existed that way, it would have to be one with its parts, truly, or truly different than its parts. As it is neither, it doesn't exist whatsoever. And relax, bring your attention back. Any observations? Questions? Venerable? How was your meditation? You're not sleeping like these guys who... Pardon? Was a wee bit better? Yeah. So also, you can use by analogy, were you able to identify the sense of self with more certainty when you did the meditation in the morning? The sense of a truly existent self? So you use the same kind of thing. Think of my body. You know? Or maybe use the sense consciousness, the tactile consciousness to feel the seeming irrefutable presence of the body, your legs and bottom sitting upon the cushion and your clothes touching your body, my body, some sense, a mental image of the body. Go beyond that to that sense of bodiness that seems to be there. So it takes some familiarity. The only way that you can do these things is by practicing again and again. Same thing with developing good heart or enhancing your good heart. In my case, to be developing good heart. It's got no good heart from the beginning, but in your case, enhancing it. You have to practice. Yeah? Again and again.
Which is meditation when you develop.
A wee bit louder, Venerable.
When you develop a mental image of emptiness. Is this based on this? Does it come in contact with this meditation? Is it?
Yes, it arises from this meditation. It's not as though there's some emptiness that you get a mental image of that had no relationship to this kind of analysis, because the only emptinesses that exist is the emptiness of phenomena or persons. There's no emptiness existing in and of itself that has a significance. You know? Emptiness always means the lack of inherent existence of some conventional phenomena. Even emptiness itself can be conceived of by the mind. When we think about it, we think of it as having some kind of real, findable existence. Emptiness. I'm going to get emptiness. I'm going to realize emptiness as though it were a real, findable thing. Also, emptiness itself is empty. The emptiness of emptiness. How about anyone over here? Any?
I seem to understand okay that that what I think of as I is a collection of the five aggregates. So it's not just the form aggregate, because just
what you think of as I is a collection of five aggregates.
Right, that any one of those aggregates by itself isn't.
That's a lower. That would be. We're getting closer. That would be kind of the lower school idea of the I. Prasangika would say, no, that's not the I.
What I can't get to, though, is why the I is not this dependent collection of the five aggregates. I mean, if I pull out the consciousness, I say that's not the I anymore. If I pull out the form, that's not the I anymore. Mm-hmm. If I pull out the feelings, it's not the I anymore. But why can't the I be that collection of those five things, and why can't that not?
Because the I itself is the appearance of the I. The I itself is imputed upon that collection, the conventional I. The conventional I is one nature with those five parts. It can't be separate. You can't perceive the I without having first perceived those parts. But those parts, the I being imputed upon those parts, designated to those parts, the I itself is not the parts. The I is not, or is not, or are not, is, how do I say? Yeah. The I is not, ain't, yeah, there we go. Ain't the parts. The I ain't the parts. There we go. Thanks for correcting my, yeah, thanks. Okay, so as I mentioned before, when there are other kind of doubts that arise like this, that actually is understandable in terms of the not one and other, in terms of multiplicity. But actually, Chandrakirti mentions many ways in the Madhyamakavatara, it refuting the shape, or we could say the configuration of the parts. Like, say, for instance, some would say, it's the chariot is the mere collection of parts. So then Chandrakirti would say, well, what if you have a big pile of parts? Would you call that a chariot? Someone might say, there's my Camaro, on the big, the wreck or so. Or maybe Crash Ryan would say, there's my Porsche, but it's no longer suitable to be labeled Porsche, or maybe taken apart. So at first that's one thing. You say, okay, that's okay, but it's the parts arranged in a particular way. So one way of saying it in we could translate this word in Tibetan, we say yib. I don't know what the Sanskrit is, being its shape. We might say it's a configuration. So then you can analyze, and in this case, as the person is a little bit different than, it has a different nature than its individual parts. The person is not form, the person is not consciousness. In the case of the chariot and its parts are all form, right? So it's a little bit different, but let's say it this way. One might think the configuration or the shape of the chariot is the chariot. You know, the parts are arranged in a particular way, a particular collection. So then you could ask, don't the particular parts still have the same configuration they had when they were separated? You'd have to say, yeah, the wheel still has the same shape it did when it was taken off the car. But now there's a new shape you're talking about that is being recognized as this particular shape as being the chariot.
Right, the relationship of the parts to each other.
Yeah. But that itself is a multiplicity itself. If you go about it from another point of view, the chariot is a name that we impute upon the parts, the collection of parts, suitably arranged. They have to be suitably arranged to be suitable to be the object of the basis of imputation of the chariot. But still, the chariot is not the basis of designation. In this context, let me read you something. I don't know, did I read you this before from Genlam Rinpoche's book? I think I alluded to it a couple of times. I don't think I ever brought it in class. Talking about the basis of designation. Does the basis of designation, what comes into, does the basis of designation, when I designate the person, when I designate Frank, the designation Frank, the name Frank, the conventional existent Frank, does that depend upon the basis of designation, the parts, in the sense that a causal relationship, first there's the basis of designation, and then I designate Frank? So Lama Tsongkhapa, Chadrakirti, the present geeks say no. It doesn't arise. Actually, the basis of designation and the imputed person, let's say if we talk about the person, are of the same nature. They're not causally related. They come into existence at the same time. Now, let's see if I can find one little sentence here.
That's the present geek.
Yeah, well, we want to talk about some other view or what? No, okay, no, it's just teasing. Okay.
Chapter
90, yeah. Dependence of phenomena. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find now. I have all the emptiness. Say, what's your question? Oh, here we go. Page 84. Do you have this book? Page 84. On the third paragraph down. It says, bear in mind that even the basis of designation itself is conceptually designated. Okay? Moreover, as soon as you speak of a basis of designation, this already implies the presence of a designated object. The two, the basis of designation and the designated object that is imputed upon that basis, come into being simultaneously, and they are of the same nature. But do not confuse this statement with the false assertion that the basis of designation and the object designated upon that basis are one and the same thing. You following? They are not. They are not one and the same thing. The basis of designation depends for its existence upon the designated object. The designated object depends for its existence upon the basis of designation. Now, you might, at first, that might seem a bit confusing. You might say, well, look at the basis is there, and the thing you impute is just conceptual. But the parts themselves are not yet the basis of designation until you identify them. You say, ah, that's Frank, or that's a Porsche, or whatever, you know. That's a temple. That's, at that point, at the moment that you have imputed, the collection of parts becomes the basis of designation. So the basis of designation does not precede the imputation.
Before that, before they were designated.
They were a collection of parts.
Still
You might have
parts,
designated
still
them as
forms.
something else. You might have said bunch of parts, old parts, you know, guy, piece of flesh, or guy, girl, you know, human, American, Caucasian. You might have had different kinds of imputations upon, which then themselves only came in, you only, say, labeled Frank as Caucasian on the basis of recognizing when the light was right, oh, he's got light complexion and so forth. That, even that label only came, the basis of designation only became basis of designation for Caucasian once the label of Caucasian was given, or male.
So the fact that I see the five aggregates and the I as being not separable from each other doesn't necessarily, they seem like the same thing, but that doesn't necessarily preclude them from being risen simultaneously but not identical. The fact that they seem to be identical doesn't preclude the fact that that's maybe wrong and they in fact are different, but they arise simultaneously.
They arise simultaneously. They are dependent upon one another. They are the conventional self. See, there's a difference here. We're just talking, on one sense, when we talk about the conventional self, that's not what we're perceiving. What our mind, what appears to our senses and what our mind reacts to is really the appearance of true existence. Although we do give labels, as soon as we label, and even in the process of labeling, we're thinking that things are real. Oh, that's Bill Clinton, or that's George Bush, or that's real. You know, that's a real fruit, or that's a real feeling. As soon as we recognize something, we give the name, that collection of parts upon which we're imputing that name becomes the basis of designation. It wasn't the basis of designation for that before. Otherwise, before you gave the label, before you gave the name, one could recognize, just see this basis of designation, and it would be recognizable as Frank before you knew that before it was labeled Frank. It only becomes the basis of designation at the moment of designating. So the name, the object imputed, and the basis of designation, and the imputation are all simultaneous. This example sometime I give of a tripod, the three legs of which, not like the ones you buy that are welded together or that you put together with string to keep them up, but when you can, have you ever done that? Have you ever put three sticks together without any other support? Try it sometime. Get some, maybe the next time you're in the Chinese restaurant, get 3 chopsticks. A little bit difficult, they're slippery, right? There's not much friction. But if you try with some sticks or something, same thing with the process of imputation. They're of the same nature. The basis of designation, the parts, and the object designated are of the same nature, but that doesn't, the fact that they're the same nature doesn't mean they are the same, one and the same. The conventional self is that way. But as soon as we've imputed the conventional self, which is of one nature with the aggregates, it appears that self is appearing back to us as though existing from its own side. Where would it seem to be existing from its own side? As the nature of the aggregates. It seems to be now, and because it seems to be findable there, now we get that particular self that's appearing to us, that we grasp to, the findable self, not just the imputed self. There's the absurd consequences if we investigate how, we check how it's actually appearing and what kind of consequences would accrue if it existed that way. Let's take a little break with that conundrum. You need a little relaxation. Okay. So why would we what would be the purpose of meditating, as Avalokiteshvara suggested in the Heart Sutra on the emptiness of phenomena, the emptiness of persons? Well, if you check in your own experience how delusions arise, all of our afflictions, or we call them delusions, our anger, attachment, so forth, they all arise, and of course we recognize them certainly from our study over some years of Buddhism as detrimental, right? The afflictions. Even things that we might have previously thought of as our allies, our attachment, our lust. That's what got us. If we didn't have that lust, if we didn't have that attachment, we wouldn't get the good things we might have thought. So we have to be trained in the stages of the path to recognize the afflictions as enemies. Then we try to apply temporal antidotes to them. Love for others, understanding of karma, cause and effect, and out of self-interest we can maybe prevent certain of those delusions from arising, or we can quell them. But we can't, just those temporal methods alone are not sufficient to eliminate those afflictions from our mind completely, right? An anger and attachment. The way that we can eliminate it from our mind completely, uproot them, the afflictions from our mind, is by realizing the emptiness of the person. And as a corollary of that, if we really realize the emptiness of the person, not just the gross lack of something gross about the person, but the subtle selflessness of persons, if we've realized that, we can apply that to all phenomena. We realize all phenomena are empty of true existence. And that takes all of the motive power, that uproots the delusions, because they're all motivated out of that ignorance. If you watch when you're getting angry, when you're irritated, when you're feeling sorry for yourself, when you're lonely, or when you're elated, or in love, or, lusting after something and thinking there's something really out there. All of these states of mind are based on the perception of the self and the perception, that's really findable and real, and the perception grasping to true outer phenomena, true existence of outer things, phenomena in general. So if we can realize emptiness is actually there. Like I mentioned many times, Lama Yeshe used to say, emptiness is not precious. Everything is empty, it's everywhere. Even caca is empty. What's really precious is the wisdom that realizes emptiness. With that wisdom, whenever we have delusion, when we start to, there are different ways that you can start to work. When you have problems in life, and you're trying to ripen your mind over this lifetime by practice of the Buddhist path, different ways. You try to recognize the nature of suffering. This is a result of karma. Even the things that we call pleasurable are not real pleasure. Here we're not talking about true existence, but they're not real pleasure, because the more you have of them, they don't constantly bring greater and greater pleasure, right? The more chocolate you eat, you don't have more and more pleasure. The more you embrace Richard Gere or whoever, you don't get more pleasure. Or let's say, Richard Gere. For some of us, Richard Gere works for both men and women. Some maybe need someone else. If they were real objects of pleasure, the more you came in contact with them, the more pleasure there'd be. Also recognizing phenomena as impure, that our appearance of them as being beautiful or pure is a mere projection of our mind. These are just temporal antidotes, but they're teaching us about how to apply emptiness. If we could recognize that all phenomena are empty of the existence that we're attributing to them, that they're like illusions that can totally eradicate the delusions from the mind, especially meditating on the emptiness of the self, because it's the sense of self that starts the whole process of the arisal of the delusions. So that's something worth investigating. So if you have problems in your life, when you have attachment, when you have loneliness, when you have anger, when you're unhappy or whatever, and you're trying to apply other antidotes, oh, I should be like a bodhisattva, this is my karma, these are all useful. These are temporal antidotes. But try, as we're beginning to understand emptiness, or trying to understand it, try to apply that understanding of emptiness. Who is it that's sad? Ask yourself, when you're sad, when you're upset. Who is it that's angry? So you look at, as we talk about when we dedicate in the emptiness of the three spheres, we always talk about three things, as is when the Majjhimika is discussed. Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti all talk about these three things, like say the agent, the action, and that which is acted upon. You can divide it up in different ways. So the agent, who is it that's being sad? If you investigate, there is a sense of a truly existent self that is the recipient or is the individual who is sad at this time. If there is no such individual and you can concentrate on that, at one moment, as you're sad and sobbing or elated and excited about something, if you see that self doesn't exist at all, it takes away, certainly of the unhappiness and of the lust and so forth. It takes away its motive force, and that can disappear immediately. Also, our negative actions, that we create negative karma, and even contaminated virtue, all are predicated upon a belief in true existence of ourself, of the action. There's a real action of generosity. There's a real needy person out there that I'm helping, that I'm going to train, that I'm going to liberate, that I'm going to help in some way. All of these things are mere designations. So the bodhisattvas, their actions become incredibly powerful, their virtuous actions, by understanding all of this, although it has some karmic consequence, it's infallible. Phenomena are like illusions in that they can't be they're not findable in the way that they appear. Like the illusory horse seems to be real horse, maybe even function to scare the people in the room, or the illusory beautiful woman that the magician might conjure up, has effect. Can cause the men to go bug-eyed and get excited, or the illusory meat with the illusory flies coming around, it can cause the dogs to salivate, but they can't. There's nothing to eat there. It's empty of that. So as you realize that can be one of the methods that you use when you try to deal with your problems in everyday life. Not only applying the temporal antidotes, but placing this ultimate antidote, meditating on the emptiness of the person, the object, let's say the enemy who is harming you, and the harm. Where's the harm? They said, you are stupid, or I don't love you. Where's the harm in any of those words? Did that hurt? Is that inherently hurtful? Don't. Love actually is sometimes good, just by itself. Where's the, then again there's the configuration of the words. Oh no, it wasn't just the words, it was in that order. We can go and we can begin to analyze and start to understand these other aspects of whether if things were inherently existent, they would have to exist from their own side that way. The way that our mind thinks when they say that, when someone doesn't really like us or they've accused us or something. So as we meditate on emptiness, that can help to apply what we call the ultimate antidote to these things, right? Let me just leave it open for a minute. Any questions or thoughts about this, or? Yes, Venerable.
Dimensional phenomena function, or how do they function? Right?
Well, there's this little gadget inside, little spring. Why do they function? Because there is, the Buddha said that although phenomena are empty of inherent existence, the law of cause and effects, the psychic law of cause and effect is infallible, and we can say that to some degree, the external law of cause and effect is infallible. Maybe the Western world would like to say the opposite. They would like to say the external laws of cause and effect, Newton's laws or something, are infallible. But even as we see in the different times of evolution of the universe, maybe the laws of physics are slightly different. The mass of the electron might be different in a different universe, or as the universe contracts, and the way that things act can be different at different times. But on the subtle level of cause and effect, all of the appearances that we experience are due to our karma. And our own individual karma and the collective the karma that we have collectively created with other sentient beings. And that is infallible. So why do things work? Because there is this, that's the way it is, Dorothy. At a certain level you have to say, like, you know who Dorothy was? Yeah, Dorothy, yeah, you remember? With the feet. What does it say? What does it say in The Wizard of Oz? Yes, there is a... Yeah, because thank you. Yes, there is a Kansas Dorothy, or something like that. Yeah, so we use that many times in joking in English, in American English. You use that, probably that's not so much in Scotland, right? Kansas? Or we joke. Sometimes we say, yes, there is real chocolate, Dorothy. Or say, yes, there is pizza, Dorothy. So maybe we could say there is a infallible relationship between actions and their results on the psychic level. But it's not truly, even though that is true, it's not truly existent. It can't be findable. It's not findable from its own side. Yet still, although phenomena that we experience, that we think of as the real world, are all like illusions. They don't exist the way that they appear. They do have a certain consistency that has arisen because of our karma. They have a lifetime. They have a certain period of time that they exist, and then they disappear. They degenerate, sometimes quickly, sometimes more slowly, like mountains and so forth, eroding. From our point of view, human point of view, those are very slow. From the point of view of a world system, maybe the mountains coming and going are very brief also.
According to our karma?
Could say that, why, there's these two levels of truth. Understanding emptiness does not necessarily prove to you all of the nature of the causality. That's something that is understood as the Buddha's mind becomes, as an individual's mind becomes more unobscured, and they can understand the causal progression, how sentient beings evolve and so forth, and how the worlds exist, and the causal connection between things karmically. Why, how to psychically, how to create the best conditions so that you can progress. All of that is infallible, yet it's not truly existence. So that's what's meant that when Nagarjuna, when it was said in the various prayers, that there is no contradiction between the fact that all phenomena lack even an atom of true existence. No phenomena has even an atom of true existence. Yet that does not contradict the law of cause and effect. Still things, even though someone might say, oh, I'm no longer bound by the law of cause and effect because I've realized emptiness. It's said, Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to say, the more an individual yogin realizes emptiness, the deeper their understanding, the more they're cautious about the law of cause and effect and karma, because the more they recognize that their ability to help others, their ability to progress themselves depends upon the law of cause and effect and karma. But all of these illusory appearances that arise because of cause and effect are empty of that very kind of reality that they appear to us as having some kind of findable existence from their own side, some kind of substantial, real, concrete existence. Tempting, alluring, frightening, whatever. So realizing emptiness is a great eliminator of fear. It's the great eliminator of temptation. Sometimes just to act morally, according, to keep ethics on the basis of the law of cause and effect and so forth, or on the basis of faith in Buddha, that's not called a perfection of morality. The Buddha said, if a person practices morality in this way, like as is understood in the Hinayana, at least in the tenets, if people don't really realize emptiness of phenomena, they're not actually practicing morality. It's though they're saying, oh, I'm not going to be attached. There's an illusory woman there. They're saying, I'm not going to be attached to this illusory woman because she's impermanent and she's the nature of suffering. But still grasping to that illusory woman as truly existent. That's not the perfection of morality. Thinking of the self who's practicing as truly existent and so forth.
Ways to identify the object of negation, because I don't feel like I'm even getting the object of negation. Like, I know you can think of something that frightened you, or when you're angry, it might come up for like a split second and then it goes. So then I feel like I can't use it to do the rest of the meditation.
There was this, we mentioned a couple times over the last year or two, there's a practice that Machik Lobdrama brought to Tibet called Chö, and Padamba Sangye and also practice. So in that practice, Chö is Tibetan word, I'm not sure what the Sanskrit word is, that means to cut off, to slay. So the Chupas, the people who practice Chö, they would go to the cremation ground at night, don't go in the daytime, there's not much help. And it's like going to a haunted house, maybe. And this particular practice was something where they could try to accumulate both collections at one time, a collection of merit and a collection of wisdom. As the fear arises in the mind, being in that place, because the actual because of the ambiance and the presence of spirits and so forth, fear arises, and the ego appears very clearly. It's actually instigating that. But with the intention, not just to flagellate oneself or to scare oneself, or because it's kicks, you get this, like watching vampire movies or something. Some people like to do these things, they get kick out of it, right? Not like that. But at that point, object of negation appears very clearly. It seems so real, and because the fear is so manifest. At that point, if you meditate on emptiness, if you're familiar with the antidotes, because right now we have to practice in this way, applying the antidote, even though the object of negation may not be that clear. Eventually, we may encounter in our everyday life some situation where the object of negation becomes very clear. When you lose your job, or your baby leaves you, or whatever, or you suddenly inherit a lot of money or something. The ego is, whoa. Watch that at that time. Basically, what we need, if we don't instigate the ego like that, we need to have a very quiet mind and a lot of time just to watch, and watch how the I is appearing. In time, you can actually observe that. You have to maybe instigate it sometime at the beginning, but later, once you begin to find it, it's like the what do you call it? The sliver in the finger. First, you have to find it. Your friend is putting the pin around. He says, "It's not there." It's not, it's there. Even though you don't see it so well. Then, once you got it there, you don't have to look at other places. Once you've begun to identify the I, you can go back to that more easily. You're getting familiar with the object of negation. So that particular process is not easy, as you can see, identifying the object of negation. The yoginis, the yogins say that that's tough part. The other part of the logical reasoning refuting such a self is actually easy. Although to us, because we're not familiar with logic at first, it seems like that's the hard part. And oh yeah, the I, that's easy to identify. But it's the other way around. In practice, it's the identification of the object of negation that's actually difficult. Once you perceive that and in its mode of appearance, then you know what the meaning of true existence is. Otherwise, it's just like Don's asking, well, what is true existence? It's not as like some theoretical thing, what someone defined as true existence. It's the way things appear. So you can say how things appear to our eyes also. They seem to be findable there. But that's a little bit, until you've actually had a taste of that, that's still not really quite satisfactory. So I think what Lama Tsongkhapa said in terms of realization, you realize the selflessness of persons first. You can more easily identify the object of negation of the self, as I understand it first. So put some emphasis on that. Even if you spend a lot of time not negating it, just enhancing it even. Going along with it. Seeing it more and more clearly. Spend a long time. I don't mean one meditation session for 20 minutes, but many weeks and months. The yogis and yoginis, they may spend many months only meditating on identifying the object of negation. Maybe 6 months, 2 years, when like doing what we might call Shine retreat, nothing else. Just sleeping and eating and taking a little break in between, always trying to recognize that. Then once that is recognized very clearly, the logic that refutes it can be applied, and one can have an insight that doesn't, really clear insight that doesn't exist at all. But to recognize it, one way is instigating it, another is just by perseverance watching it with a very, very calm mind. So that's why we need Shine. That's why we need tranquil abiding, shamatha, and the ability to analyze within it, to see how that is, how it is appearing, what are its attributes without disturbing the concentration, how the mind is reacting to that, one part of the mind watching the subjective aspect, how the mind is, responding to that observation, that reference. So, what more I can say, I don't know. Okay? So let's spend a couple moments now, before we do dedication, let's do a couple moments meditating on the emptiness of feeling, another aggregate. Because our feelings are things that we really strive after, isn't it? We want to have good, pleasurable feelings. And of course, we can try to meditate on the objects that we grasp to as supposed sources of those feelings, friends, family, lovers, ice cream, chocolate, whatever, fame, reputation, money. We can meditate on the emptiness of those, but also the feelings themselves that we might still be grasping to that. The feelings themselves are empty of true existence. They do appear. Things that are called pleasurable feelings are experienced by our consciousness in such a way that we want to keep them. We want to elongate them. How else can you define it? Unpleasant feelings are things that the mind would prefer to be free of. Disturbs the mind, is not and the ego and so forth. So for instance, when you meditate on the feelings, also you can first meditate on the self, the emptiness of the self. If there's no self experiencing these, they're just feelings appearing there. Like the Buddha, when he was sick, was asked, "How are you feeling?" And the Buddha said, "There are waves of pain coursing through my body, but my mind is at ease." Usually if there's waves of pain coursing through our body, our mind is bananas, right? Because we associate with that pain. If there is no I, it's just like observing a movie, Oh, now screen is dark. Now there's, now it's white. Now there's colors. Just an observation. But the feelings themselves, to our own perception, say the mental happiness or the mental unhappiness, that which we're striving for. Say we want to be respected, we want to be successful, we want to be praised, we want to be loved. There's why do we want those things? Because they bring about what we consider to be mental happiness, right? What we label conventionally mental happiness. But that mental happiness does not exist inherently. It's just a name we to that particular dependent arising that comes up in conjunction with meeting those conditions. That experience we label as pleasure. It's not pleasure from its own side. You can check else in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara when Shantideva mentions in the text, meditating on the emptiness of the feelings. Let's try this for a couple minutes. Let's first of all just sit quietly. Again, bring your attention inward. And take as your object of concentration the clarity of your mind for a few moments. The Buddha taught that the 5 aggregates are empty of true existence, not only the self. Avalokiteshvara in the Heart Sutra told Shariputra that the Bodhisattvas meditate on the emptiness of inherent nature of the 5 aggregates in addition to the emptiness of the self. So the feelings are also empty of true existence. What we call feelings, what we identify as feelings, we label as feelings, are certain experiences. The experience of pleasure, that which the mind enjoys, displeasure, and indifference. See if you can generate a pleasant mental consciousness, pleasant feeling within your mental consciousness. You could think of how fortunate we are to have a perfect human rebirth, or to meet the teachings, or anticipation, daydreaming of some supposed pleasurable experience. Other people's admiration or love for you, or your fame or whatever. Or think of an unpleasant, try to develop an unpleasant mental feeling, unhappiness. In some ways, this seems very substantial and concrete. If the feelings were truly existent, having arisen and existing from their own side, they would not be able to change. They would remain the same. In fact, that's one of the causes of our unhappiness sometimes, or our confusion about happiness. We expect things to remain the same, but they change. Feeling, see if you can see this, get a sense of the appearance of the object of negation and feeling. A feeling, state of mind, let's say mental consciousness, that seems to be unpleasant from its own side, or pleasant from its own side. Perhaps it seems like no doubt whatsoever that feelings do exist from their own side. Substantially, findable, like chocolate, or like a bee sting, something so irrefutable and concrete. The feelings themselves are appearances to our that particular mental factor that we call, the particular aspect of the mind that we call feeling, the pleasure, the indifference, the unpleasantness or suffering. Those appearances, those feelings, arise because of causes and conditions. So they're changeable. But even when they're there, contaminated feelings that we experience, even uncontaminated feelings of the Aryas, the Buddhas, they're not truly existent. They're merely imputed as pleasure or pain or indifference on the basis of some appearance that arises because of karma. If pleasure were truly existent, findable from its own side, the way that it's appearing to the mind, a particular feeling, once it was generated in our continuum, it should remain that way. Feeling is something which is an impermanent conventional phenomena. As Nagarjuna said, if phenomena were truly existent, they couldn't function, they couldn't change, they couldn't evolve, they couldn't come into being, they couldn't cease. We can analyze at other times feelings that arise. If they're truly existent, they would have to be arisen truly from themselves, from something else, inherently produced from something inherently different from themselves, inherently produced from both self and others, or they'd have to arise without any causes whatsoever. The feelings don't arise inherently from themselves because they would have had to exist since time immemorial in the same form. They don't arise from something inherently different, because if they arise from something inherently different from themselves, not just nominally different, they'd have no relationship with that at all. What they arose from couldn't be a cause of them. So although the feelings, even when you arise from meditation, the feelings again appear, just as when you arise from meditation, the self appears, the house appears, our friends, our life appear again. We recognize them as having a different nature than they were perceived as having before. Same thing with the feelings. They lack the substantiality that our mind attributes to them, that entices us to try to obtain those feelings. They're like illusions, merely imputed. Like merely imputing boy, merely imputing girl. Merely imputing white, merely imputing black. when you feel unpleasant, say sweaty or legs aching or tired, you can meditate on the emptiness of the individual who we're perceiving to be the experiencer of that suffering, let's say. There is no truly existent recipient of the suffering. There is no truly existent feeling of suffering. There is no truly existent cause of that suffering, agent of that suffering. Yet still it appears. Meditating on the emptiness of suffering doesn't mean that suffering doesn't conventionally appear according to our karma. But it takes away the urgency of both the unpleasantness of the suffering and the allure of the pleasant feelings. Seeing them as mere suffering. Arisen from causes and conditions. In meditation, on the emptiness of the suffering and the emptiness of the pleasure, seeing the true existence of them as totally non-existent, recognize them as non-inherently existent, all that appears is a mere vacuity, not the pleasure, not the conventional pleasure, not the conventional displeasure or unpleasant feeling. And think, whatever merits I have created this lifetime that have not yet ripened, whatever merits I've created during this course of study on the Heart Sutra, whatever merits I've created today in this weekend review practice day, whatever merits I've created, I will create in the future. Although ultimately empty, they exist conventionally. They do have an infallible result within our own cyclic existence. To dedicate them in such a way that, first of all, they're not exhausted through just the ripening once, but to dedicate them to a very distant goal of our own development of bodhicitta, our own development of the wisdom that realizes emptiness. For the welfare of sentient beings, myself becoming first less a problem to sentient beings, later of some benefit, ultimately taming our mind, being able to lead sentient beings to full enlightenment. So although the merits may not seem as substantial as feelings or as chocolate, we do have a conceptual understanding of their seeming reality. But those merits are mere imputations. Conventionally existent, but merely designated by the mind. There's no truly existent merits. no truly existent virtue that we've created. Where within the actions did we create the karma? At the beginning, the middle, the end, on the combination of parts? Still they function. The goals dedicated to are development of good qualities, elimination of bad qualities, especially development of bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta, realizing emptiness, the attainment of enlightenment, total perfection of our mind. Those goals too exist conventionally, but can't be found anywhere. They're mere imputations. Conceptually designated, they have no concrete or substantial inherent existence. What kind of inherent existence does the dedication have that tries to join these merits with those results? Merely imputed to moments of mental activity, observing, thinking about the merits, wishing that those merits would ripen in these particular ways. One can't locate the act of dedication anywhere. It's just a name imputed to this collection of parts. It can't be found within the parts or outside the parts inherently. Yet still dedication functions, as do the merits. Still the goals dedicated to can come into existence. Particularly the agent of the dedication, myself. Who is the agent? The I is not inherently existent. The self is not inherently existent because it's not inherently one with the aggregates. It's not inherently other than the aggregates. I is just a name I use to designate this collection of parts. Can't be found within the parts, although it's one nature with them. Because it's one nature with them, it can't be found apart from the components, the aggregates, separate from them. In order to help sentient beings realize this wisdom, this truth, which is so liberating, I'm going to dedicate my merits to quickly myself enhance my realization of emptiness, to be able to share that realization with others, to lead them out of samsara into real useful, blissful happiness.